Hello and welcome back to New Vegas, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at some interesting melee weapons. We're going to be taking a look at the cattle prod and the dress cane. Why I'm grouping both these two together, it's mostly because they'd be awkward to talk about individually and they're not like other weapons, so I figured I would include them both in this list, even though they don't really have very much in common, so this one's going to be a little bit of a weird one. The cattle prod is actually like a mid to late game melee weapon that you can see like the MPs of the NCR carrying around. These are fairly rare. You're probably going to have to take one from them or steal one of these. Most shops don't really sell them, although I'm not really on the lookout for them, so maybe shops sell them more often than what I think. The cattle prod requires 75 melee to use and 4 strength, which is kind of weird to have it have that much melee requirement when it's not really a regular melee weapon. This is supposed to be like a non-lethal melee weapon. This one does 5 damage on hit, which is extremely low, 12 damage per second, which is also very low. Has a big old 5 crit damage on it, so also low. Has a 2 times crit chance though, so you're more likely to hit crits than normal, which I guess is okay. This one costs 28 action points to use in VATS, so it's fairly high VATS cost, at least for a weapon that doesn't really do that much damage. This weighs 3 weight, so it's not even affected by pack rat. This has a whopping 500 item HP though, so cattle prods do not break fast. You can use one of these for basically forever. And the unique effect that this has is that it inflicts 50 fatigue damage on hit. Now fatigue damage is kind of bugged in New Vegas, at least by default. You can have mods that fix it. But fatigue damage is supposed to build up until you knock an enemy out. But this is based off of your overall damage from the weapon. And that makes it so you're actually building up fatigue slower than you would otherwise be with the cattle prod. Again, this is supposed to be like a non-lethal weapon. You hit somebody so much or hit an enemy so much that they just collapse from the fatigue damage. Kind of a cool idea, but it just doesn't really matter in this game, especially when you have other abilities that kind of do this better or other things that can inflict fatigue damage better. Beanbags with the riot shotgun is probably the best way to inflict fatigue damage, and even that isn't really that good. If you actually want to do this in a practical way, probably take something like paralyzing palm and just smack stuff with unarmed. That's going to work out a whole lot better for you and probably be a better weapon overall. And you could also take super slam, which knocks down enemies too. So if you just want to knock an enemy down so that they can't fight back and then beat up on them, any melee weapon can do that with that particular perk. Let's go over the pros and cons of these weapons, which are going to be a little bit strange because it's almost split in half as to what they're good for. The cattle prod is good for non-lethal damage, which is kind of useful, and it has really high item HP, and those are kind of its only 2 pros that it has going for it. The cons are that it's just not very strong, it doesn't have very high damage, it doesn't have very good DPS, it's just not really that great unless you're doing like a challenge run for a melee build or a pacifist build and you want to have a weapon. Let's talk about the dress cane next, and then we'll go over the pros and cons to that, because otherwise this might be a little bit strange. So the dress cane you can find usually in the Ultralux. I think that's actually the only place that you can get a dress cane, so you will probably have to kill some people in the Ultralux, which isn't very difficult. Even if you're doing their mainline quest, you're going to find a couple dress canes. This one requires 50 melee weapons and 2 strength to wield, so it is fairly low in both those requirements. This one and the cattle prod also count as holdout weapons, or at least improved holdout weapons, so you can sneak them into casinos and other areas, which is kind of useful, I guess. The dress cane does 22 damage per hit, which is actually pretty decent. 51 damage per second, which is also decent. This one has 35 crit damage, so it actually has more crit damage than its regular damage, interestingly enough. A 1 times crit modifier, which is okay. Costs 27 action points, which is okay as well. Not the best, but alright. Weighs 3 weight as well, and this one only has 50 item HP. The dress canes do break quite a bit faster than something like a cattle prod, 10 times faster even. These also have the same VATS attack. They have the lights out, which is similar to a lot of the blunt one-handed weapons, which is just you run forward and smack something. Does extra damage, but it costs extra action points, so it's fine as a VATS attack, but nothing way crazy. No special effect on top of this. For the pros and cons of the dress cane, the pros are that it has actually pretty decent damage per second, and you can sneak this in, which is kind of cool. The major cons though for this one is that it just has very low item HP, and it's going to fall off compared to other melee weapons, even sneak-in melee weapons. Something like the War Club, if you want a blunt one-handed weapon, would be better than this, or even the lead pipe, like the unique one, would be also better than this. Things like the Bowie knife and Chance's knife would also be good if you just want to sneak them in. All of those are better than something like the dress cane. There are perks that help out these weapons. Super Slam that we talked about, so you can knock enemies down. Kind of defeats the purpose of the cattle prod, but I mean, you could use it with the cattle prod. Purifier to do extra damage towards certain enemies, Slayer to just attack faster, and Piercing Strike so that you can punch their armor. Those are all pretty useful. They're all great for melee and unarmed in general. For an overall rating for the cattle prod, this one's going to go right into F tier. I think it's one of the worst weapons in the game. It's a non-lethal weapon that's not very good at its job. Most of the time, unless you're doing a pacifist run, you don't really care if you're going to be lethal anyway, and the best non-lethal run is just going to be a high speech and a high barter, as well as high charisma character anyway, so you might as well just pump those stats and not even worry about a weapon, unless you're specifically doing a challenge run to just use the cattle prod or to use non-lethal weapons like this, and I guess beanbags and maybe some other weapons. Again, paralyzing palm would probably be a better option than this. And then for the dress cane, I'm going to put this one into low C tier. I think it's fine. It's an okay enough melee weapon that you're just going to be getting too late into the game to really matter. If you want to use it, cool. I do like it. I think it's funny to give this in the tuxedo to Veronica and just watch her beat up people with the cane. I find that kind of hilarious. But outside of that, it's not really like a melee weapon or an unarmed weapon that I'm just going to go for out of the blue. Tell me your thoughts on the cattle prod and the dress cane down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Do you guys like these weapons? I mean, I kind of like the dress cane because it looks cool, but I don't really use the cattle prod. I'd be curious. Do you guys enjoy it? If so, leave that in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.